Hey, it's me, Bill Ferreter. Time for another 10-minute team tip. Listen, I was speaking with a principal not too terribly long ago, and he said that he was integrating a win time into his daily bell schedule, a 30-minute period that teachers could use as tier 2 reteaching time, a little time and support to master the content that we're teaching right now in our classroom. And he asked me, what is it that teachers are going to say when I introduce them to this intervention time? And I think my answer caught him by surprise. I said, you're going to have a lot of teachers that are skeptical with you simply because they're going to see win time as an additional prep. How did I know that was true? Well, because that's how I felt as a teacher when we introduced win time into the work of our building. I was nervous because I already had enough lessons to plan. Coming up with an additional 30-minute lesson for every day that we had win time felt like just one more thing to do, and I was intimidated by that. Now, if that's you as a teacher, if you're concerned that win time might feel like an extra prep and now you've got more work to do, I want to reassure you that it doesn't have to be an extensive amount of extra work or extra planning for a whole ton of reasons. Let me show you some of the things that I did during win time, and let me make some suggestions about how you can do this work too without being terribly overwhelmed by additional planning. So first of all, the four things that I found myself doing the most often during win time was pre-teaching vocabulary, previewing complex text, giving kids chances to do or complete alternative demonstrations of mastery, and teaching differently. Of all of those things, teaching differently is what we normally think of when we think of reteaching time. And you are going to have to teach your concepts differently during that period of time. Right? In fact, I always like to say that when you're thinking about an essential standard, you've got to reteach 5 or 6 or 7 different ways, right, for every essential standard, because there's so many different needs that students bring to you. And if we teach in the exact same way we taught the first time, we can't be surprised when we don't get different results. That's not reteaching, it's repeating. In fact, I'm not even a real fan of the word reteaching because it sort of suggests that the way that we taught was perfectly fine and that we just need to try it again. Something was wrong with the kid because the learning didn't land. What I really want you to do is I want you to think of that win time reteaching as a chance to facilitate relearning. And that's going to require a different approach. Now, you will have to reteach during that intervention period, and I'll show you ways you can make that easier at the end of this video. But I also want you to see that there are 3 other things you can be doing during your win time periods that will help your students to learn the first time you teach. And all of these things, if we did them consistently and intentionally, would make it easier for us to teach our lessons the first time around. Take pre-teaching vocabulary for a second, especially if you're a secondary teacher. You know that vocabulary is the key, right? If students understand the terms that you are using in your classroom lessons, they're more likely to learn the first time around. So what if we use that win time, that what I need time, to do a pre-teaching lesson on the vocabulary words that we're going to use in our unit? That's not a whole ton of extra work. In fact, I'm willing to bet that during your regular class period, you do some vocabulary instruction. What I'm suggesting is why not use your win time to do some of that vocabulary instruction too? That's not an additional prep because you already know how to teach vocabulary. I mean, let's be real. If you have a Quizlet, right, or a set of flashcards for your students to use, right, they can come in and practice with flashcards on vocabulary before you ever start teaching the unit. Then they'll be ready for the instruction that comes along later. Or what about previewing complex text? Especially if you teach older students, you and I both know that reading complex text often is a major part of the work we do in our classroom. Well, if you're trying to teach students content and they're not yet ready to read the complex text that you're presenting, why don't you use some of your intervention time to preview that complex text with students? What might that look like? Well, I'll give you an example. I was an 8th grade science teacher, and one of the things that we taught were viruses and bacteria, other pathogens. And I found this current event not too long ago that I think is fascinating. Scientists have found what they're calling a zombie virus. hidden in the permafrost of the Arctic and they're digging it up? Can we agree not to dig up zombie viruses? I mean, I just think that should be a rule. Now, my kids would be fascinated by this article, but given that it is written at a reading level that's higher than many of my kids can access, if I just introduce this article in class, many kids won't be able to read it. So what if I use my win time to preview it with kids? What if we read it through one time together? What if we looked at the captions or checked out the pictures? That would be an easy way for me to get my students ready for initial instruction, and it's not going to require a whole ton of pre-planning on my part. I just have to have the article ready to go, and I have to be ready to pre-teach it with my kids or preview it with my students. Or what about this idea? What if we took that same article, right? Here it is on the CNN website. What if we rewrote it at a lower grade level? And so when we were previewing with our students, they could read the article at a lower grade level before they ever saw it at grade level. Now, if you were asking me 2, 3, 4 years ago, I would have said that'd be pretty hard, right? Like, how do you rewrite an article at a lower reading level? Today, though, with the help of AI tools, it's really easy. Watch what I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy this web link. And then I'm going to go to Diffit, which is a great tool for leveling texts. And I'm going to paste the article over here. See where it says text links and PDFs? Okay. And when I paste that link in here, now I can set it at whatever reading level I want. So I taught 8th graders, but maybe I'd like it rewritten on the 4th grade reading level. Check this out. I can also write it in a different language if I'd like for my students who are learning English as an additional language. And when I hit the magical go button down here on the bottom, Diffit is going to automatically get the article and rewrite it at a lower grade level for me. Now, do you see what I'm going to do during my win period? I'm just going to print out this rewritten version, right? And then I'm going to use that with my students. We'll read that together during one of those 30-minute intervention periods. That's pre-teaching, isn't it? Now, when I present this same task in class at grade level, my students who aren't yet working on grade level will have a much better chance of understanding the content the first time around. What I think is neat, and I want to point this out to you, is that it will even give you vocabulary words that go with the article. So remember we talked a moment ago about why not pre-teach vocabulary? Let's do that with complex text too, and Diffit can make that easy for you. Or here's another idea that I think is neat. I know for a fact that many students aren't all that interested in reading text, but a lot of kids are into listening to podcasts or watching video essays. How do I know that? Well, it's true for my daughter. If you give her some nonfiction text to read, she probably isn't going to dig too deeply into it. But if you gave her a podcast to listen to, she might be willing to consume this text in a different format. So what if we use some of that win time to give students a chance to explore our content in a different format? What if we turned this into a podcast kids can listen to? That sounds far-fetched, right? Like, how do you turn a text-based article into a podcast? Well, the answer is easy, right? At least in a digital world. We use a tool called Brisk, right? It's as an extension. You can put it into your Chrome browser. You can see I have it over here. And when I turn that extension on, now I get a button in this corner, and it's going to ask me, what do you want to do with this particular content? What do you want to make with it? What do you want to create out of it? And there's lots of options, but my favorite's down here. It's a podcast. And when I click on that particular link, it's going to ask me a couple of questions. What do I want to make? I'm telling it, give me a podcast. I can turn this podcast into a different language. Again, I could use that with students learning English as an additional language. I can write the podcast at whatever grade level I want. Now, in the free version, I can only get a podcast that's 1 to 2 minutes long. If I wanted to pay for Brisk, I could get longer podcasts. But when I hit this button over here, which, by the way, makes me giggle every time, it says brisket. As a larger gentleman, I like brisket. So I'm going to mash that button. And this is crazy because it's literally going to take that article and turn it into a 2-person podcast between Maya and Ethan. Now, we get the text of the podcast, so we could read it, but who wants to read a podcast, right? Now, I'm going to click on this link, and I want you to see if you can hear this. I'm not sure. I can't remember for sure if you're going to hear this, if I have my video set up right. I will, however, put in the chat box the link to this later, so if you want to read it, you can. Take a listen.
Hey, Science Explorers. I'm Maya, and today we're diving into a super cool mystery about something called permafrost.
That's right, Maya. Permafrost is like a giant freezer hidden underground in the Arctic that's been keeping secrets for thousands of years.
Imagine a giant time capsule buried deep in the ground that's been frozen solid for tens of...
You guys see what's going on here, right? Like, now I can give my kids a podcast to listen to during that when period that will help them to preview complex text, which means then when I'm ready to teach the content to my students, they're going to be more prepared to receive that initial instruction successfully. That's something you can do during your win time. And I just want to point out that it's not hard, right? Like, it was literally one click of a button for me. So the concern I always had as a teacher about win time is how much planning is this going to require? And the answer is, as long as I use AI tools to support me, the answer is not a whole heck of a lot of planning. Here's a third idea. I'm a big believer in the notion of alternative demonstrations of mastery. Now, here's what I mean by that. I think we've got some students who can master our standard. They just can't do the task we're asking them to do. I always use a boy named Austin when I explain this. He was an 8th grade science student of mine who was a super science nerd. But his mom told me on the first day of school that he had never passed science in middle school. And the reason for that was because most of the teachers in our school were requiring students to use writing for their demonstrations of mastery. Show me what you know by writing something out. Austin had a written processing problem. So then, how can Austin show me mastery? Well, what if I created an alternative demonstration, an option that he could pursue that I would accept as a demonstration of mastery? In my case, for Austin, that was, Austin, why don't you record your responses rather than write them out? You don't ever have to write a response for me at all. I'm not your writing teacher. Why don't you record your responses and then I'll grade the recording instead? Now, when can that happen? Both the recording and the feedback that I provide? Guys, it can happen during your win period. I want you to realize that as teachers, you can use that time in a lot of different ways to meet the needs of your students. Now, how do you create alternative demonstrations of mastery? Well, I want you to pause the video for just a second. If this is something you're interested in, go ahead and pause your video and I want you to scan the QR code that you see on your screen right now. Because I made a tool called an AI agent in ChatGPT that will literally walk you step by step by step through the process of making an alternative demonstration. It'll churn out a bunch of ideas. It'll give you written directions for kids. So see, this is your planning investment, right? What you have to do to plan is ask the chatbot to help you think of demos and to give you materials. Then you just turn your students loose. You give them those materials. When do they do that work? During your 30-minute win period. Now, the final thing that we can do during win time, right, is we are going to have to teach differently sometimes. And I'm not kidding when I say to you that I think we're going to need 5 or 6 or 7 different ways to teach every essential. Now, if you'd have asked me 3 years ago, I would have told you that's not realistic. How do you ask teachers to come up with 5 or 6 or 7 different ways to teach a strategy to students? But I 100% think it's possible in today's day and age because AI can help you to generate content quickly. Now, I'm going to show you just a couple of examples, and then I'll give you a set of prompts that you can use to explore further. But for example, what if we tied our content to the specific interest of the student who needs reteaching? I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're a first grade, second grade teacher, and you're teaching digraphs to students, right? The way that letter sounds work together. Take a look at the prompt on your screen. Let's say you've got a boy and he hasn't learned digraphs yet, but man, that kid loves Buffalo Bills games. What if you went and wrote a story about a boy who likes watching Buffalo Bills games with his dad that incorporates the CH and SH digraph? That would be a really neat way to reteach, and I imagine it would motivate the student because it's connected to their interest. But how do you write a story that's connected so specifically to an interest of a student? The answer is you don't. You take this prompt, you go over to ChatGPT or any other AI assistant, right? I'd like to point out ChatGPT is my favorite AI assistant, but there's others. There's Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, and they're just tools that you can really ask to do almost anything for you. When I paste that in here, it's going to generate a 60-word decodable text about a boy and his dad who like to watch Bills games. Now I can reteach in a unique and interesting way that's connected to a student interest. And it took me seconds to do that planning, y'all. See, I want you to realize that this is fantastic reteaching, and it took me seconds to plan. I'll give you another example. This one is personal to me. This is connected to my kid. So my daughter is not at all interested in biology. She was studying the structure and function of cells. She bombed her quiz. She had to do a retake, but before the retake, she had to do some relearning, right? Well, how do you get a kid who's not interested at all in biology to learn about the structure and function of cells a second time when they didn't like learning about it the first? So I've dreamed up an idea for my kid. She is passionate about Greek tragedies. I don't know why or how, but if you give her a Greek tragedy, she's all in. Shakespeare, Homer, all those people, it's like, that's her jam. So what if we went to ChatGPT and said, explain the structure and function of cells in terms that are likely to be understood by a kid who cares about Greek tragedies? When I go over to my AI assistant again and click new chat, literally in seconds, now I have a customized piece of content that will explain to a student with a very specific interest a completely different content topic through the lens of their own individual interests. That's crazy to me. I was working with a teacher in Wyoming who was teaching summer school, and he tried this out, and he had a student who was super interested in a particular video game. So he had it explain the 3 branches of government through the lens of that particular video game, and it worked. Right? See, that's what I'm trying to say to you is that we need to reteach differently. But planning has become a heck of a lot easier now that AI has become widely available to us. What if we gave our kids body movements to remember our content? It's a great idea, right? I used to teach my students about plate tectonics. When the plates come together, if they're the same density, they're going to crumple and fold into mountains. When you teach students body movements, they'll use those movements on tests. But where do you find a body movement for an abstract concept? The answer is you go to ChatGPT and you ask it for help. Like, take a look at this one. Let's say you're teaching the caste system. Can you give me a body movement that 7th graders can use to remember the rules of the caste system? Now I'm going to go over here and start a new chat and ask ChatGPT for that body movement. And that could be a lot of fun, right? Now, during my reteaching period, I call those students in that need some reteaching in the caste system, and we practice this body movement. You know, I'm thinking right now as you and I are talking, why don't we make this a TikTok dance, right? So what if we said, can you create a TikTok dance? Why? Oh, I don't know, because my kids are super into TikTok. I don't know about yours. So here it comes. There's a TikTok dance that your kids can practice and use during the course of a reteaching period. Will it work? I don't know, but you're going to need 5 or 6 or 7 different ways to reteach. And it literally took seconds to generate that idea. I'm trying to reduce the planning demands that go into that win period. Let me show you that planning doesn't have to be something that you worry about. Or what about this one? What if you gave students a song about your content, about your topic, and had them evaluate the song? What does the song get right versus what does the song get wrong? That's a great way to reteach. Kids like songs. How do you generate songs about your topic? You don't. You go and use my favorite AI song generator, which is called Suno. It'll make a song for you in any style about any topic in seconds. You play the song for the students. You ask them to evaluate the lyrics by answering the kinds of questions that you see on your screen. This is what I mean when I say we need to teach differently. Your lesson during win time does have to be different, but generating the materials for it can happen super quickly. All right, listen, I'm going to put in the chat for you, or in the session description for this particular video, I'm going to put 2 links for you to a set of prompts that I've created for teachers that have all kinds of ideas about things that you can do to reteach, so intervention, and then a whole bunch of prompts that you can use for extension, right? Or ways to challenge students during that win time too. Because let's remember, what I need for a student who's already working beyond your expectations is additional challenge. So how do we challenge students during that time? What do we do with students who don't need reteaching? The answer is we give them challenge tasks. Now, how do we generate those challenge tasks? Well, go take a look at those links, because what you will see is ChatGPT is just as good at generating extension tasks as it is at generating intervention activities. So that's what I want to see teachers start to do during win time, right? Those 4 recommendations, the 4 things I found myself doing the most often. We pre-taught vocabulary. We previewed complex text. Kids came in and did alternative demonstrations of mastery to show me that they knew something beyond the assignment I had given. And then I literally taught concepts in a different way. And what's crazy is the first 3 are things that prepare my students to more successfully achieve mastery or reach proficiency during my initial instruction. I would have done some of that stuff in my classroom anyways. And then the the last thing, teaching differently, right, is the one that scares us the most. Like, is that a different lesson prep every single time you have a win period? The answer is not if you use AI as a thought partner. You can generate materials in seconds, and that just was never possible before. So I just want you to remember that a win time doesn't mean doesn't have to mean a huge amount of additional planning for teachers. As long as you turn AI into a thought partner for you and with you, you can provide meaningful reteaching without a lot of extra time. So if you have any questions, please reach out. I believe deeply in win time, but I respect the time of teachers deeply too. And I want to help you figure out ways that you can do this work meaningfully without having to give up half your personal life to pull it off. All right, see you now.